Namaste, everyone. Welcome back. We've just concluded another series, the four-part series of Becoming a Force for Good. Like last time, we have people that have seen the series and posed questions, so we're going to read these questions for Acharya Das to answer, and I'll start off. This first question is from Alexandra from Australia, but she's asked quite a few questions in this one question, so maybe we'll just take it bit by bit.
Okay, sounds like a good way to do it.
All right. Okay. She started off, she says, "Hello, Acharya Das. I wondered about a couple of things you spoke about in your last set of classes, which I'm hoping you would clarify for me. The first question I had was about the title of the class in this set, Is Envy Stealing Your Happiness? So I wondered if the opposite can also happen, that happiness could steal or take away a person's envy."
Namaste, Alexandra. So, in short, of course, the answer is yes. But in answering these questions, it's important to understand that we're speaking from a spiritual perspective or a spiritual angle of vision. And what that means is happiness as is understood and chased after and pursued in different ways in the material world has a sort of like a meaning to people. When they think of happiness, they're thinking of things in a very specific idea or concept. And as we've discussed with when we talked about happiness in general, that there are actually, according to the Vedas, different types of happiness, and the examples were given. We had some quotes from the Bhagavad Gita that there is a happiness which in the beginning can taste like nectar and later can become like poison. And it arises simply from the contact of the senses with the objects of the senses, though seeing, tasting, smelling, all different types of hearing, all different types of sensual activity. The nature of that happiness, or any happiness that you think that you derive from it, number one, it is not permanent. It has a beginning and definitely has an end. But beyond that, it is absolutely not fulfilling. And everybody that is honest will admit that yeah, I was really excited by something, I got really jacked up, or I was really going for it, or whatever. But at the end of the day, my takeaway was I was not fulfilled. I may have put on a brave face and took tons of selfies and posted them, or I might have told everybody, yeah, it was great, and everything. But when you're alone and you're bad, and it's kind of like, was it really that big a deal? It filled up a little space for a while. So material happiness is not really considered true happiness from a spiritual perspective because of its temporary nature and because it cannot completely fulfill. Spiritual happiness arises from this awakening of my true spiritual identity, of being really in contact with myself, and then developing as a result of that a different perspective of this world and the experiences related to this world, but even beyond that, from a profoundly positive and transcendental experience of and it is not an exaggeration, unlimited joy. So when you ask the question, can happiness steal or drive away envy? And of course the answer is yes, if we're referring to spiritual happiness. Sometimes people think that if they've got enough stuff, if they're having enough good experiences, they won't be envious anymore. And that is not true. That is not the case, because none of these experiences can actually fulfill. Envy in and of itself is an admission. We must recognize it as an admission that I am so incomplete. My life is actually lacking so much that I'm looking and looking around and looking what other people have and what they're doing in their lives. And I come to think that if only I can have that, then somehow my life will be more perfect, if not completely perfect. I will actually feel some fulfillment and some satisfaction. And it's not the case. So the condition of envy is the result of the material condition, the material conception of life that we are living in. And as long as one lives in that material conception, you cannot escape the feeling of dissatisfaction, this hole that you're trying to fill up. I was watching, what's his name, John Goodman, a small interview of him. He's a famous actor and comedian.
Yeah.
And he's had like a massive weight problem in his life, and he's sort of come to grips with it. And in this interview, he's revealing that he's actually dealt with a number of addictions, different kinds of substance abuse, as well as, this food thing. And he's got to a point in his life where he's sort of getting things kind of squared away, and he's a little bit more in control of his life and feeling a little bit more balanced and better about things. But he did speak about the fact that this emptiness that you're always feeling and always looking to fill it up. You're always looking to, fill that empty space. So envy automatically is going to manifest if we are chasing material happiness. A person that lives maybe a little bit more controlled and subdued type of life, they're living more in the mode of goodness, they will not experience this as much as others who are actively chasing happiness. People that have learned to accept life for what it is, who actually have a greater purpose and are living with a different sort of focus in life, aren't bothered as much by those who are aggressively and actively seeking to become happy. If you are aggressively and actively seeking happiness through the material world and material experiences, it is unavoidable that you will experience envy. You'll be looking at others and thinking their life is more perfect, their experience, their possessions are more fulfilling, that's kind of like what I need. And it's absolutely not true. That is another illusion. So this is actually the downside to the whole social media experience, because it really aggressively induces this consciousness of envy of others. And there's so many studies out and showing how destructive it is. I'll try and keep the next one short.
Thank you.
No, I mean they're big subjects, and you can't just deal with them in a fluffy sort of way. And the fact is that majority of people that hear these things, they will feel that there is this element of truth to it. But because you're living in a different headspace, you're living in a different type of consciousness, it's sort of like it takes a little while to sort of like actually understand it, particularly in relation to your own life.
Another question here is, it's an add-on. It says, and if we want other people's stuff because we think it will make us happy to have what they have, then if you start feeling satisfied inside, is that a first step on the path to being free of envy and to being happy?
It would be easy to say yes, but I'm going to say no. Not from the conclusion, but from the point of view that it's the first step. Yes, the more satisfied you are, the less you are going to envy others. It's a fact. But being satisfied or more satisfied is not the first step. Something is needed to change in your life. Some really foundational stuff is going to have to change in order that you might come to experience increasing satisfaction. So we can't say that the satisfaction is the first step. That's getting pretty close to the conclusion. You know, there's this really interesting concept in the Vedas and the yogic teaching, and there is this word Atmarama. This word Atmarama is an amazing and wonderful word. Atma means the self, the true self, who I am, meaning not the body, but the spiritual person within. And Rama here means the enjoyer, one who is enjoying. So it literally could be understood to be spiritually self-satisfied. To be self-satisfied, meaning you are not in want of anything. You have come to the position to realize that you have everything that you are looking for. It actually resides within you. The fact that you are a spiritual personality, death is not a possibility. You will never die. You cannot experience pain. Your body can, but the spiritual entity does not. You are not subject to the laws of material nature. Your body is, but not you. You become free from fearfulness. You become free from anxieties, all of these different types of stuff. And when you begin to experience the joy that comes from the awakening of actual self-realization and the cultivation of an intimate connection with the Supreme Soul, the actual Lord of your heart, it is so transformative that a person could exist, for instance, in a condition of great physical discomfort and poverty even, like the yogis that wandered off and lived in the caves in the mountains or whatever. The genuine mystics, the genuine spiritual personalities, it didn't make any difference to them whether they were in a cave or in a palace, because their world was an internal world that they were completely immersed in. That while they go through the external motions of their life and everything, there is no want. There is no want whatsoever. There is a wonderful story in the Mahabharata, and it's also recorded in the Srimad Bhagavatam or the Bhagavad Purana, and it speaks of a great warrior king who was a great saint as well. His name was Yudhishthira. Yudhishthira, he lived an amazing life. I mean, he was such an attractive personality. He was a powerful warrior king and engaged in this enormous battle to create an environment of righteousness where people could live very peacefully and everything. And he lived his life as a king. He was so loved by his people that if he went into the street, people would fall to the ground. They would, on their knees or even prostrate themselves, they would bow to him. And it's kind of like, oh my God, you know, this is like so far from idol worship of stars, or, you know, this funky, crazy stuff, or kissing up to some politician or something. Here they saw an actual spiritual personality that was so concerned, deeply concerned about the welfare of his subjects and all living beings. He had committed his life to their welfare. People out of profound respect and appreciation, would bow before him. So he lived in unimaginable wealth, surrounded by all this and the adulation and love of so many people. But when he felt that he had come to the point of fulfilling the responsibility of that part of his life, there was a very stable kingdom and environment, there was a successor who could reign in his place, he made the decision to now spend the remainder of his life completely focused on his spiritual service and his spiritual quest. And he just simply rose up in the middle of one night and removed all his rings and ornamentation and everything. He stripped down to his underwear, this very simple underwear that they would wear, and began walking out of the palace. When the guards saw it, they just like cried out and woke everybody up. And when people heard what was happening, they rushed to follow him. And they were crying and begging him not to leave. And it's described that he did not even look back. Like when a person has gone to the toilet in the bushes and then, pulls up their drawers and walks away, not looking back to where they had come from. I mean, that example was pretty much used. And he just walked. He only stopped once to bend down to pick up a torn cloth that was discarded in the street to wrap around himself, and continued walking. And the people wailed, and he paid no attention to them. His duty was fulfilled. So this was a clear manifestation of not just some artificial renunciation. It wasn't like he had to give up all the stuff that he loved. He was simply acting out of a sense of duty and a sense of service to all people and to God. And when the time was finished for that particular service, he simply got up and left, and everybody was totally shocked. So we're talking about this really amazing. The yogic scriptures are filled with these wonderful stories about such personalities. And when you hear about them, and we look at in our own line of teachers, they're just like such extraordinary individuals who are living a genuinely spiritual life. And because of their deep immersion in this tremendous inner satisfaction and fulfillment, they do not feel to be in want of anything other than the need to continue to serve in whatever way is required. Service to the Lord within their heart, to God, and to their fellow living beings.
Sounds like.
So I lied. I promised a shorter answer, but I don't think anybody's complaining.
No.
This is wonderful, wonderful subject matter.
Continuing with that, Alexandria is asking, if so, how can we get to start feeling satisfied inside?
How do we start? Yeah. So this is the good question. How do we start to get to this point of feeling satisfied inside? It's going to be two main things that are going to be involved. One has to do with the cultivation of spiritual knowledge. Knowledge which guides us in our life, guides us as to how to look at things and how to make decisions. Knowledge that also comes from, we find it within these yogic scriptures. We will hear it from spiritual teachers. I have the tremendous fortune of having two profoundly wonderful spiritual masters or teachers that have affected my life so tremendously. They changed everything for me. And so the need to seek out genuinely spiritual people and to take guidance from them. This is a verse also from the Bhagavad Gita, that in order to learn the highest truth, one should approach a spiritual master. One should inquire from him submissively and render service to him, because the fully realized souls have seen the truth, and so they're able to pass it on. So that is part of the spiritual process. But the most foundational thing that a person needs to do is to engage in a genuine spiritual process. So you notice generally at the beginning, although we didn't do it today, but maybe later, the beginning of our talks, we do this kirtan, which is this chanting of this transcendental sound. When this becomes something that you habitually do in your life, you develop this good habit of engaging in this form of meditation, you become purified, not because of yourself, but because you are putting yourself in the proximity, right next to an all-purifying agent, this transcendental sound. And it purifies the heart and mind, and it brings about spiritual realization. You begin to see with clarity what it is that you see the truth. You don't just hear a spiritual truth and understand it mentally. You will actually come to see the reality of this. I'll just read it. There's a verse from the Bhagavad Gita. It is from the 6th chapter, and it's the 8th verse of the Bhagavad Gita. And it says, a person is said to be established in self-realization and is called a yogi, a true yogi or mystic, when he is fully satisfied by virtue of acquired knowledge and realization. Such a person is situated in transcendence and is self-controlled. He sees everything, whether it is a pebble, stones, or gold, as being the same. This is an extraordinary verse, and perhaps at some time we can speak more in detail about it, because there are many things to appreciate and understand there. But so the cultivation of spiritual wisdom, yogic wisdom, and the process of this meditation upon this transcendental sound are the things that are going to be transformative and make it so that a person's life changes, and that we all equally have the opportunity to attain the status of being an Atmarama, or one who is fully self-satisfied.
Continuing on with her questioning, she poses, the other question I had was about the last class you gave to do with a spiritual approach to economics and the environment. You said words to the effect that at present the people are serving the economy, but it needs to switch to have the economy serving the people. I'm not old enough to have lived in an economy where the economy serves the people, i.e. before Edward Bernays started to change things around. Can you please describe what kinds of things would be different in a system where economics serves the people?
No, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do it because it's actually a really big subject, number one. Number two is I am not an economist. By virtue of my spiritual association and practices, from hearing what I've heard from my spiritual teachers and from the Vedas, I know what is a good situation. And it is true that we have a situation where everybody's just pretty much serving the economy instead of the economy serving people. But in modern history, I don't think that there has been any time when we saw such a situation. And you cannot we have to understand that the economy we cannot retool things and just artificially control and manipulate things and think it will have a desirable result. There has to be a broader acceptance of at least a certain percentage of the population that the way in which everyone is heading right now is not only not ideal, it is far from it, and factually probably quite detrimental for our happiness, for our peace, and for any real lasting benefit. And for individuals in society then to choose to begin to alter their personal course in life, then that begins to have a multiplier effect. It begins to have an effect on the people that are the leaders of society, determining where things are going. But it cannot be a top-down thing. It has to be more people embracing a spiritual lifestyle and more spiritual understanding. Then there is some hope for improving things like that.
Right. Okay, this next question is from Scott from New Mexico. Thank you for your series on doing good in the world. I was very interested to hear your talk on envy stealing one's happiness, and how the growth of advertising has developed a culture of envy. There are some people that don't seem to keep running after consumer goodies, at least once they've reached a certain level of material comfort, but how does one deal with the fear of losing what one has, and the guilt over having so much more than the majority of people in the world?
Maybe I'll ask if I can have this. Actually, there's seems like about 3 questions in here. So Scott, you'll have to excuse me if I don't agree with everything. My personal experience in life, and from what I know from a spiritual perspective and from spiritual teachers, is that envy is never satisfied. Envy, of course, springs from this intense longing or desire for happiness or for experiences or things, which is broadly termed as lust. And in the Bhagavad Gita is described as the all-devouring enemy of mankind. That lust is never satisfied, and it burns like fire. So this is a spiritual truth. It's not that people think, oh, if I get enough stuff, then I'll be okay. I'll be satisfied and my quest or my hunger for things will decrease. That is not a reality. It may happen to some people. And when it happens to an individual, where they begin to sort of like mellow out in this mad pursuit of things, it comes about because of something that has happened in their life, and they've had a shift of direction. It has not come about from reaching a certain level of consumption and having a certain number of goodies. That never satiates. If anybody has slowed down this mad rush to get things or whatever, it's not because of having a certain amount of stuff. It's come from a shift in their own life somehow, the way that they are looking at and thinking about things. He mentions about, the guilt over having so much more than the majority of people in the world. This is actually wonderful when a person has that type of experience. It clearly indicates that there has been some transformation, and they feel empathy with others. generally the quest for material happiness hardens us against, or it makes it so that we tend to empathize less. And the more we go down that road, the more easy it is for us to use others and to abuse that follows that. So when a person has this shift where they begin to think that I'm very fortunate for whatever reason, I have so much more than others, and they think, what can I do? They generally are driven towards the execution of what's categorized as karma yoga. And in this karma yoga process, they begin to utilize at least a percentage of their wealth or possessions or whatever to try and alleviate the suffering of others, or direct it in some spiritual or humanitarian sort of cause. And in doing so, it sort of like really awakens a kind of happiness in them that they had never experienced before. And it's kind of like, oh, wow, this is, it's just a wonderful experience. So then the other question dealing with, or the other part of the question dealing with fear of losing what one has. This is like, this is a really amazing situation. This anxiety or fear, people generally experience in life in three ways. One is, I want something. I want an experience, I want a relationship, I want whatever. I want something. And in this desire to have this thing, in the hope that I will become more happy or fulfilled, then I feel this anxiety that perhaps I will not be able to get what it is that I want. And so I'm plagued with this anxiety. Will this person actually love me? Will I be able to get enough money? Will I get the promotion? Will I attain this? Will I be able to do this? Will I be able to go on this trip? Whatever. And then there's this anxiety because you want something and you're afraid you may not be able to get it. Having got that which we desired, I am now experiencing the fear of potential loss. What if this person leaves me? What if someone steals my goods? What if, there are just endless things that happen in life where things that we are holding dear to us are taken away. And because we know that this in our heart of hearts to be a reality, so even when we have acquired something, we're still in an anxiety. The shift has now become, I'm an anxiety that I'm going to lose this. And then I'll become unhappy, I'll become sad or unfulfilled or whatever. In the third situation, when someone actually loses something that they valued or held closely to them, then you're overcome with a kind of anxiety of, if only I hadn't have done this, if only that didn't happen, if only this didn't happen, if only it wasn't like this, then I would still have it. And so if we look at the anxieties that people experience in life, they're generally divided into those three broad categories. And before you get what you want, you're in anxiety. When you've got it, you're still going to experience some anxiety. And then when you finally lose it, again, you're in anxiety. So it's like something's not really working here very well. So, but that is a natural situation, is something that's very natural and should be expected and occurs because people they have wrongly concluded that a relationship, an object, a situation, the way people look at me or whatever, anything related in this world will somehow fulfill me, will somehow give me what it is that I'm looking for. And that is not the case. A person needs to live a spiritual life without feeling a spiritual fulfillment, and all the other stuff, it comes and it goes. And sometimes I get a little bit of a buzz off it. Oh, that tastes nice. Oh, that didn't taste very nice. But I'm not going to lose the plot over some material experience. We realize the transitory nature of things just coming and going. Okay, I think we covered that one.
Jane from Berkeley, California. She says, Dear Acharya Das, thank you very much for your ongoing classes. In your talk on racism, you mentioned self-esteem in relation to being overweight and compared it to having self-esteem issues in relation to the race of one's body.
Okay, can we just hold on there a second? If you have come to understand that I was equating these things, then I apologize for not being more clear. But I don't think that I was actually equating these things. We were talking on the subject, if I remember, of can I just borrow this for a sec? Yeah, on racism, and as part of the explanation of in dealing with the topic of racism, we spoke about self-esteem, and that the whole idea of self-esteem, it actually is, there are many different parts to it. And one of the things that people look at is the way your body looks in terms of whether you're considered pretty or handsome or very plain or disfigured even or whatever. And things like the size and body type that you have, you know, the nature of a complexion or a so-called racial extraction, or what people associate all these different things with the subject of self-esteem. But it's not correct that I would equate all of these things together. One equals the other. That's not the case at all. So just wanted to clarify that issue.
As someone who has ranged from overweight to obese and less frequently slim, I have experienced how this can affect how people relate to me and how I feel about myself. But that's different from feeling either pride or shame based on the color of my skin. Because I made myself fat with my eating, it's not just something I'm born with. And so feeling bad about my behavior and my body, which reflects that, seems to make sense. I just wondered if you could expand on your comments in relation to that, and perhaps at some stage discuss this skewed relationship with food that seems so common.
Jane, please allow me to speak very frankly. The problem, the actual heart of the problem that was being discussed is actually being manifest in the question. And this is what actually becomes quite difficult for people. The difficulty of, you can't be something that you're not. If you see the world a certain way, if you have a certain type of consciousness, you cannot just erase that. In the process of cultivating a deeper understanding and appreciation of life and things, we have to make sure that we don't overlap material consciousness and spiritual consciousness. And I'll give you an example. When Jane states, but that's different from feeling either pride or shame based on the color of my skin, and talking in relation to eating problems, because I made myself fat with my eating. It was not something that I'm born with. And so feeling bad about my behavior and my body, which reflects that, seems to make sense. Well, the heart of the problem is when you say, I made myself fat because of my eating. Who is the I? Who is the me that is being spoken of here? Are we talking of the spiritual being that resides within this body, which is only a vehicle? The spiritual being, the Atma, does not become fat from the consumption of food by the body that the body is using. If it was termed that I didn't make myself fat, right? Because of emptiness, wanting to fill up an emptiness inside, then my tendency to overeat made my body fat. Okay, that's absolutely perfectly correct. But if I say I made myself fat, what you're doing is perpetuating the problem and creating a situation where you can never become free from it. It is precisely this misconception that I am this body, and how that misconception is played out in so many different ways. For instance, if I have a male body or I have a female body, then I firmly believe I am a male or I am a female. Already you have an enormous problem by this firm conviction and not being able to have any distinction in your own mind and in your life between your body and yourself. If I think I am white or I am Asian or I am black or I am, whatever, again, this strong statement and adopting this as your actual identity is the very cause of so much suffering and so many problems in this world. And we set ourselves up to be unable to escape. In this case, we're talking about, the tendency to eat more than necessary. When we adopt the idea that the body is me, and therefore the emptiness I feel within the heart, my heart of hearts, is arising because of this body and mind, then obviously I'm always going to be engaging in activity to try and fill that hole, but I'm going to do it in relation to this body. There is no way out. There is no escape. Like, I mentioned earlier John Goodman, and this interview I saw where he spoke about his struggles with being way overweight and then the use of different substances, how he was saying, and his realization is that all addictions are pretty much the same thing. It's this attempt to fill an empty hole with something that cannot fill it. And I'm going like, okay, wow, that's really amazing that you've come to that conclusion. And it's wonderful, and I applaud him. But of course, then the question is what is it that you are going to do to fill up that hole? And that has largely to do with this cultivation or of a deeper understanding or appreciation of who you actually are. So the idea of getting into a discussion on equating this problem with perhaps this problem, with perhaps this problem, and then people can disagree and fight over those issues. People can say that to equate being overweight due to overeating is the same as, racism. It's just like we don't want to. This is the wrong approach to discussing the problems, and it does not lead us to an actual solution and an actual understanding. This is such a wonderful, it is a foundational spiritual truth that in our life we are discarding constantly. Every time I use the pronoun I, or we, or us, or they, invariably I'm speaking of some material conception. The idea that I am this body and someone else is their body. And this is the problem. And I'm not saying we get rid of language and we try to come up with a new language. No, it's a question of coming up with an understanding. And so in talking about these issues, don't say that I overate and therefore I became fat. No, I had this emptiness within, which led me to do something to try and fulfill it by eating to fill up that empty space. As a result, my body became very overweight. And because I was identifying with this body, when people shun me or make jokes about me because of the way my body looks, I feel offended, like they're talking about me. They can't even see me. They don't even know who I am. It's necessary to frame these things. It's not semantics. It's necessary to frame these things very clearly so that we can understand and appreciate them, and in a practical way try to live a more spiritual life. So I actually know that I could see there's a few more, but we've run out of time, so we're gonna, I think.
I was hoping we could practice.
Yeah, sure.
Mantra meditation.
It's always their perfect way to close things out.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you very much for presenting these questions that people have had. And it's nice when people actually question, because it gives you the opportunity to speak in a way that's often more personal, because it's related to people's personal lives. So thank you very much again. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Thank you very, very much for having me, and hope to see everyone with our next series that we're doing on the Bhagavad Gita. Thank you.